He didn't raise his voice at first. He didn't need to. All it took was one look. One look from a man who owned half the city to remind a young waitress that, in his world, she was invisible. The room went silent when he finally spoke. Not because he was loud, but because every word cut deeper than a knife. And no one in that luxury restaurant knew that the woman standing before him, trembling, humiliated, carried his blood in her veins. Stay with me till the end, because this is not just a story about wealth and pride. It is a story about regret, the kind that arrives when it's already too late. Who was this waitress, really? Why did her face seem strangely familiar to the billionaire, even before the truth? And what secret had been buried for more than 30 years, waiting for this exact night to surface? They say the past never stays buried forever. It waits. It watches. And when the moment is right, it stands up and demands to be seen. This story will test everything you believe about family, forgiveness, and the choices we make when ambition calls louder than love. What you're about to hear is based on real events. Names change to protect those involved, but the pain, the shock, the truth, all of it is real. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Jonathan Hale was not born rich. He built his fortune brick by brick, steel by steel. By the time he turned 62, his name opened doors that money alone could not. Boardrooms bowed. Politicians listened. Failure had learned to avoid him. But success had hardened him in ways he didn't notice. He believed kindness was weakness, that emotions slowed men down, that people who failed simply didn't work hard enough. He had learned how to conquer the world, but forgot how to listen to his heart. Jonathan had everything a man could want: 3 luxury homes, a private jet, investments spanning 12 countries. Everything except the one thing he didn't know he'd lost. And that loss was walking toward his table on a cold November evening, carrying a tray of wine glasses and a past he had erased from memory. Her name was Elena Brooks. She was 29 years old, a waitress by necessity, not by choice. Her mother had raised her alone, working 2 jobs, never complaining, never explaining. When Elena asked about her father, her mother would simply say he chose a different life. No viternis, just quiet pain. After her mother's death 2 years earlier, Elena worked nights to survive and days to remember. All she had left was a silver necklace her mother wore every day of her life, a small pendant shaped like a bird in flight. Elena never took it off. She didn't know where it came from. She didn't know it was a gift from a man her mother had loved deeply, a man who walked away before Elena was even born. She didn't know that man would walk back in her life on the worst night of her career. That night, Jonathan Hale hosted a private dinner at the Sterling, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Investors, executives, power brokers, the kind of people who measure their worth in influence, not dollars. Elena was assigned his table. She tried to be perfect. She rehearsed every step in her mind. But perfection is fragile when nerves take over. Her hand slipped, just slightly. A splash of red wine touched the cuff of Jonathan's white shirt. Time stopped. The table fell silent. Jonathan stood slowly. His eyes locked onto hers. "Do you have any idea what this costs?" His voice was calm, but cold, like ice cracking under pressure. "Elena froze. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll replace it. I'll pay for the cleaning. I promise." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "No, you wouldn't last a lifetime trying." The words landed like a slap. Laughter rippled across the table, nervous, uncomfortable, but still there. Jonathan leaned in slightly, his voice lower now, but somehow sharper. "People like you should learn your place before stepping into rooms like this." Elena's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Not in front of them. She nodded, apologized again, and backed away from the table. Her hands shook as she walked toward the kitchen. She could feel every eye on her back. The shame pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. And that's when Jonathan noticed it. The necklace, a small silver bird, catching the light as she turned. His breath caught just for a second. A memory stirred, faint, like a song he'd heard in another life. Then it vanished. He returned to his conversation, brushed it off, told himself it meant nothing. but something inside him had shifted just slightly, like a door left open in a locked room. How would you feel if someone humiliated you like that in front of a crowd? If your worth was reduced to the cost of a shirt you could never afford? Would you walk away, or would you fight back? Think about that as this story unfolds, because Elena's response is not what you'd expect. Humiliation lingers longer than pain. Elena finished her shift in silence. She scrubbed tables, refilled glasses, smiled when tipped, and died a little inside with every polite nod. Where her shift ended at midnight, she sat in the employee restroom and finally let the tears come. Not loud sobs, just silent streams running down her cheeks. She stared at herself in the mirror and whispered the same thing her mother used to say when life got heavy. You're stronger than this moment. But she didn't feel strong. She felt small, invisible, exactly the way Jonathan Hale had made her feel. She touched the necklace at her throat, the only piece of her mother she had left, and wondered if her father, whoever he was, would have stood up for her. Or if he, too, believed people like her didn't belong in rooms like that. Meanwhile, across the city, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse, staring out at the skyline he'd helped build. The necklace haunted him. He poured himself a drink and let his mind drift back. 35 years ago, there was a woman. Her name was Caroline. She lived in a neighborhood Jonathan had worked hard to forget, the kind of place where rent was late and dreams came small. He had loved her once, or at least he thought he did. She was gentle, kind. She saw something in him no one else did. But when his first business deal came through, when the doors to a bigger life started opening, Jonathan made a choice. He left. No explanation. No would-be. She called. He didn't answer. She wrote. He didn't reply. 6 months later, a letter arrived. It said she was pregnant. Jonathan burned it. He told himself he was protecting his future, that a child would slow him down, that Caroline would move on. He never looked back, or so he thought. But memory is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care how much money you make or how far you run. That night, Jonathan pulled out an old box from the back of his closet, something he hadn't opened in decades. Inside were photos, letters, a ticket stub from a movie they'd watched together, and at the bottom, a receipt from a jewelry store, a silver necklace, a bird in flight. He'd given it to Caroline the night he told her he loved her, the night before he disappeared from her life. His hands trembled as he held the receipt. It couldn't be the same necklace. It couldn't be. But the image was burned into his mind now. The way it caught the light. The way the waitress touched it when she walked away. The way her eyes, those eyes, looked just like Caroline's. 3 days later, fate stepped in. Elena collapsed during her shift at the Sterling. The stress, the lack of sleep, the weight of grief she'd been carrying since her mother's death, it all caught up with her. An ambulance was called. She was rushed to the hospital. And by some twist of timing, Jonathan Hale was there that same afternoon. Not as a patient, but for a charity event, a wing of the hospital that bore his name. He was walking through the corridor when he saw her. Unconscious, pale, being wheeled past him on a stretcher. And he saw the necklace. His chest tightened. Without thinking, he followed. He demanded to speak to her doctor. Demanded to know her condition. The staff hesitated. "Sir, are you family?" He paused, then lied. "Yes, I'm her father." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. And in a way he didn't yet understand, they were true. The doctor ran tests, routine checks, dehydration, exhaustion, nothing life-threatening. But Jonathan asked for something else. A DNA test. The doctor looked confused. "Sir, is there something you're not telling us?" Jonathan's voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Just run the test. Please." The doctor agreed. It took 2 days. 2 days of Jonathan sitting in waiting rooms, pacing his office, canceling meetings. 2 days of Elena recovering, confused as to why a billionaire who'd humiliated her was suddenly paying her medical bills. And then the results came. A doctor entered the private room where Jonathan waited. The envelope in his hand seemed too small to hold the weight of what was inside. "Mr. Hale, there's something you need to see." Silence. Paper rustled. The DNA results confirm a 99.9% match. Elena Brooks is your biological daughter. The world tilted. Jonathan sat down, not in a chair, but on the floor, his back against the wall. Not as a billionaire, not as a man who owned empires, but as a father who had just discovered he destroyed his own child. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just sat there, staring at nothing, while everything he thought he knew about himself crumbled. The doctor quietly left the room, and Jonathan wept, not the silent, dignified kind of tears, the kind that come from a place so deep you didn't know it existed, the kind that break you open. He remembered Caroline's letter. He remembered the necklace. He remembered walking away. And now, 30 years later, the bill had come due. When Elena woke the next morning, she found Jonathan sitting beside her hospital bed. His eyes were red, his suit wrinkled. He looked older somehow, like the weight of the world had finally caught up. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'm your father." Elena blinked. She thought she misheard. What? Jonathan's hands shook as he handed her the paper. The test results. The truth neither of them had been ready for. Elena read it once. Then again. Her breath caught. She looked at him, this man who had humiliated her, dismissed her, made her feel worthless. And now he sat before her, broken, claiming to be her blood. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared. And finally, she said, "My mother loved you. Every day of her life, she loved you. And you left." Jonathan tried to explain, tried to apologize, tried to give her reasons that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I was young. I was afraid. I didn't know how to be a father." Elena listened quietly. Then she spoke, and her words cut deeper than any boardroom rejection ever had. "I didn't need your money growing up. I needed your presence. I needed someone to walk me to school, to teach me how to ride a bike, to tell me I mattered. My mom did all of that alone. She worked herself to exhaustion so I could have a chance. And when she got sick, I held her hand while she died, wondering if you ever thought about us, wondering if we were even real to you." Jonathan had no answer, because the truth was he hadn't thought about them. He had buried them so deep that they became ghosts. And now the ghost had a name, a face, a heartbeat. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan tried to give Elena everything. Money, apologies, his name. He set up a trust fund, offered her a place in his company, rewrote his will. But Elena didn't want his empire. She wanted something he didn't know how to give. Time, presence, a father. She agreed to meet him for coffee. Once a week. No cameras, no lawyers. Just two people trying to build something from the ruins of what should have been. It was awkward at first. Painful. Jonathan didn't know how to talk to her without sounding like he was negotiating a deal. Elena didn't know how to see him as anything other than the man who had abandoned her mother. But slowly, in small moments, something shifted. He asked about her childhood. She told him about her mother. He listened, really listened for the first time in decades. 6 months later, Jonathan stood in front of his company's board of directors and made an announcement that shocked everyone. He was stepping down as CEO, not retiring, but stepping back. He wanted time. Time to rebuild what he'd broken. Time to learn how to be the father he never was. The board protested. The press went wild. But Jonathan didn't care. For the first time in his life, he chose a person over profit. He chose Elena. She didn't forgive him right away. Forgiveness, like trust, takes time. But she let him try. She let him show up. And in a world where so many fathers walk away and never return, that was enough. Jonathan funded scholarships for single mothers. He partnered with organizations that supported children growing up without fathers. He became an advocate for the very people he used to ignore. Not for publicity, but because he finally understood what it cost to be invisible. 1 year after that night in the restaurant, Jonathan and Elena stood together at Caroline's grave. It was the first time he'd visited. He knelt down, placed a hand on the stone, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Elena stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. She didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. But she said something else. "She's watching, and I think she's glad you finally came home." Jonathan looked up at his daughter, this strong, kind, resilient woman he had almost never known, and realized something. He had spent his entire life building a legacy. But the only legacy that mattered was standing right next to him. Not in a boardroom, not on a Forbes list, but in a cemetery, holding his hand, choosing to give him a chance he never deserved. Some lessons come gently, others arrive like a storm, and wisdom often visits too late to undo the past, but just in time to shape the future. Jonathan Hale learned that the hard way. He learned that success without connection is just noise, that wealth without love is just weight, and that the people we dismiss, ignore, or walk past may be the very ones we need the most. Elena learned something too, that forgiveness is not about excusing the past. It's about freeing yourself from it, that you can honor your mother's memory without carrying her pain, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are just broken people who never learned how to heal. What would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have forgiven him or walked away? Do you think some mistakes are too big to come back from? Or do you believe people can change? And if you were Jonathan, would you have had the courage to face the truth, or would you have run again? Comment below. Tell us how this story made you feel. Tell us if you've ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it, or if you've ever been the one asking for forgiveness you weren't sure you'd get. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone, that every choice we make echoes forward, and that it's never too late to choose love over pride. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life stories of loss, redemption, and the quiet power of truth. Because some stories don't just entertain us, they remind us who we are and who we still have time to become.